it's Izzy. Yes, I am in the same jumper as my last video. It's a different day, I just still have the same jumper on. And in today's video we are going to be doing my most disappointing books of 2019. Now, same with the worst books. I thankfully don't own many of these. In fact, I only own one of these, so I guess I have good taste in buying books. But you know, we use the library, we use our audiobooks, and then we don't have to own books that were disappointing. We have quite a few books on this list. I'm going to try and be succinct with what disappointed me about these books, and just know that basically my most disappointing books counted as books that I thought were going to be like 4 or 5 stars, or like new favourites, or like I just had heard amazing things about them and like were convinced they would at least be pretty good, and they just fell short in some ways or many ways. Not enough for me to hate them like in my worst books, but enough for me to like finish and be like, wow, that was nowhere near as good as what I was hoping for. So yes, let's get started with the list. First book may be a bit controversial because I know a lot of people love this book, but I can see why it just personally didn't work for me, and that is Eliezer and Her Monsters by Francesca Zappia. This book follows our main character Eliza, and she like draws and writes like a web comic series thing, and it's like really popular. It has like 1 million readers or something. It's like super popular, but no one knows her identity, and she's just like the author of this thing, and she has anxiety and like panic attacks. And then at school a new boy comes to school and they start to befriend each other, and then she finds out that he is actually a fanfic writer for her web series comic thing, and is like the most popular fanfic writer of this series, and she knows who he is but he doesn't know who she is. And yeah, it kind of follows their relationship, her relationship with fandom and her comic, and her relationship with her family. And for me, what didn't work was Eliza. Her attitude to everything was just so infuriating. There was quite a lot of focus on Eliza and how she related to her family. She had 2 younger brothers and 2 very loving parents, and all she did was complain about them. I know she has anxiety, I also have anxiety and suffer from panic attacks, but that doesn't give you a right to be a jerk. And I feel like Eliza was just horrible to everyone and didn't expect any repercussions from that, and just thought she could like be a bitch and like nothing, like, and she was just allowed to be, and she just could not compromise. Like she would show no interest in her brothers, she would show no interest in her parents, she would complain all the time about her parents, about how her parents don't understand the internet, but at no point did she try and explain to them what she did and what that did for her and like how it worked. Like she just didn't talk to them, and then moaned about how they didn't understand, and it's like, how are they going to understand if you don't say anything? Her poor brothers just wanted like to share their achievements with her, and she just like was not interested. So she was just way too self-centered and selfish, and I just hated her as a character. I really liked the writing style of this book, and I really loved the inclusion of bits and pieces of her fictional work, because we got some like details about this web comic series thing that she was writing, and that was super interesting and really engaging, and I loved that a lot. But the rest I just couldn't, and I didn't like the romance either, so I ended up giving it 2.5 stars, and I was very disappointed because I expected to give it at least 4 stars, if not 5, so that was a disappointment. The next book is probably the most controversial one, and that is Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. I read Evelyn Hugo last year, absolutely loved it, 5 stars. It was a favourite of the year for me. I just adored it, and I like sobbed through it, and it was just incredible. So I did like go into this book thinking, you know, have realistic expectations. Can anything top Evelyn Hugo? Probably not. So like I wasn't going into this like thinking it was gonna be Evelyn Hugo level, but I was expecting to enjoy it a lot because it sounded like something that was really interesting. This follows our main character Daisy Jones, and she is like this brilliant like star who kind of has a rough start but then joins this band and becomes Daisy Jones and the Six. So as Daisy Jones and there's 6 other characters, and it kind of just follows them, their relationships, their experience on the road. I really enjoyed the exploration of addiction in this book. I think that's what it did best, and I really enjoyed that part. Also, I am a big fan of, because this is set in the 70s, 60s or 70s, and it's like a rock band, kind of like Fleetwood Mac, and I love Fleetwood Mac, so like I did enjoy that part because I do like that genre of music, so like that was cool to follow a sort of Fleetwood Mac-esque band, which is what this band is based off of, so that was cool. But this is told in an oral history form, meaning it's basically told in an interview, so like it's just like Daisy said this and then like Billy said this, and like so there's no prose, it's just speech and like interview, and I just felt so disconnected from the characters. I just couldn't get, like I just didn't really care about any of them because I don't feel like I got them. I don't feel like I got inside their heads. I don't feel like I got their motives 100%. I don't feel like I knew them distinctively. Like I know Daisy, Camilla and Billy, but like the rest kind of just blended in for me, and I listened to it originally in audiobook form and I was kind of just forgetting like who was who. I just don't think they had distinctive enough roles and parts, and I just didn't connect with the story at all, and I just don't think that this style of writing worked for this book because I just didn't really care what happened to the characters, and this is such a character driven story. Like you have to care about the characters and you have to care about their like relationships and each relationship that one character has with another, that I needed more emotion from it, and I just didn't get that. I know some people like found it super emotional and like cried and loved it, and like that's absolutely fine. Like if you connected with it, that's brilliant. It just didn't really connect with me. I just didn't really feel a lot while reading it. I mainly just felt good at the epilogue part. Like I was like, okay, yeah, I like that part, but yeah, the rest was just a bit disappointing. But it is a beautiful hardcover, so I'm not gonna get rid of it. I did give it like 3 stars, so it wasn't like a terrible book, just was not as good as I was hoping, especially after hearing everyone's reviews, which were like, oh my god, it's even better than Evelyn Hugo, and I'm like, is it? Don't do Evelyn Hugo dirty like that. Evelyn Hugo is incredible. The next book is The Thief by Megan Wallen Turner. This is a fantasy, like the first book in a fantasy series that basically follows this man who's like the best thief in this magical place, and he is let out of jail by the like king, I think, so that he can steal this stone for the king and then he can get out of prison, I think is the plot. I don't really have anything to say about this except it was beyond boring, like beyond boring. Nothing happened. We knew nothing about the main character, like nothing. We didn't know a single thing except that he was a thief. Like we knew nothing about the characters. The plot was so slow, and then I thought we were going to be like pulling off this kind of like heist situation, and it was nothing. It was just so boring. Even the like actual like trying to get this stone thing was, I was like, is it over yet? This book was under 300 pages, like it was like 270 I think, and I was considering DNFing it, even though I can read that in like a day or two. I just hated it. It was just so dull, and the characters had like no distinction. It was just so boring, and I thought I was really gonna like it because I like books with thieves and stealing, and it had a lot of like folklore and like that kind of stuff. And so I thought it was going to be a really good book for me and a series that I was really going to enjoy, but I will not be reading the second book because I hated the first book. The Thief could have gone on my worst books of 2019, but I decided to put it on my most disappointing because I really did have high expectations for it, so it was like a real letdown rather than just like hatred. I was just like gutted that like I disliked it so much. The next book is Warcross by Marie Lu. Now again, this wasn't actually a book I disliked. I think I gave it 3 stars. Like, I didn't have a bad time reading it, but hearing all the reviews and like reading the summary, I thought it was going to be the perfect book for me. I love video games, and so I tried to read Ready Player One in the past, but I just couldn't get over the writing and the slurs that we used. It just wasn't right for me, and I just didn't like it, so I DNF'd that book. So I thought like this was the perfect book for me. It was like Ready Player One, but much more modern and kind of for everyone. I feel like Ready Player One had a very specific target market, white straight males, so sorry, that's the truth. And so I thought I was really gonna love this book, and I did like a lot of aspects of it, but this basically follows our main character, what's her name, Emmy? Is that her name? I can't be bothered to look it up. So main character, and it like hacks into this opening ceremony of this game, this like Warcross. It's like a tournament that's basically as big as the Olympics but for video games, and she hacks into the opening ceremony of this to like get money, I think, and she gets caught and thinks she's gonna like, you know, be like sentenced to prison or something, but actually she's asked to fly out to where these games are taking place and compete in them. So they're like competitions in these video games. They're like virtual reality, so you're like in them. It's cooler than the current virtual reality we have, but there were several things I didn't like about it. One, barely any of the plot actually took place in these games, and that's what I was really reading it for the game, like, and for these competitions, and that just wasn't much of the book at all, so that was really disappointing. And also there was a mystery about who this villain person was. They were called Zero, and we didn't know who they were, but I figured it out like instantly. Like, as soon as who it was introduced, I was like, oh, they're Zero. And like I was like, I can't be them, like that's way too obvious, like surely she's gonna do something different, but she didn't. No, it was exactly what I thought it was gonna be, so that was really disappointing because I was like, you couldn't really have made it more obvious, like it was so obvious. And yeah, I also thought there was going to be sort of this like found family kind of trope because she joins this team for these games, but we get like none of their interactions except when they're playing the game, so again that was super disappointing. And overall, like, it was a fine read. Like, I didn't dislike my reading experience, but there were just so many things that I think could have been done way better and would have made this book a lot better, and it was just a disappointment really, seeing as it's in this video, obviously. The next book is Only Human by Sylvain Neuvel. This is the third and final book in the Themis Files series. This is a series that follows a girl who, when she's younger, falls into this big blue robot hand, and then we follow her as an adult as she tries to figure out what this thing is and find the other parts of this robot. Really cool first 2 books, loved them, really engaging. I gave them both 4 stars. The third book was terrible. I won't go into spoilers, but if you've started this series and you've read the first 2 books, don't read the third one because it's terrible. It was like this completely different like tone and pacing, and the characters I liked weren't in it, and it was just so boring, and it was so like philosophical, but not in a thought-provoking way, just in a please let this be over kind of way. I just did not like anything about it. Like everything I loved from the first 2 books just was not in this book, and really I just think it's much better to just read the first 2 books and leave it there, because the third book totally ruined it for me. And if you've read the third book, like the things that happen at the beginning, like where they are at the beginning, was just also disappointing and weird, and it just felt purposeless. It just felt like there was no purpose. Is that a word? I don't know. It just, like, the whole book just felt like it had no purpose. All the cool characters weren't in it. I just didn't like anything about it, and it was kind of it kind of ruined the series for me because it was so disappointing. And yeah, I would not recommend the third book to anyone. The next book that was really disappointing was Legendary by Stephanie Garber. This is the second book in the Caraval series. I read both of these with Pamela, and we were both like, is this it? Like, it just felt like Caraval 2.0. Like the exact same plot points, the exact same plot beats, just slightly different with slightly different characters and a slightly different plot, but it just felt like she'd just rewritten Caraval. Caraval basically follows this like magical like party thing that's put on, and basically you have to follow the clues and find this thing, and then you can have one wish from this master legend person. He'll like grant you a wish, and that's basically what it is. It's kind of hard to explain, but I enjoyed the first book, thought it was a fun time. Definitely had some things that I would have changed, but like it was an intriguing read and I enjoyed it as a reading experience. But Legendary was just painful. Nothing happened that was of any significance. We got very few answers to the mysteries of the book, and I just didn't care, and I was just bored, and it just felt like I was reading the same book as I had just read. So all in all, I just didn't get the purpose of it. It just felt like it was written for no reason. I just didn't like it at all. The next book, again, is probably a bit controversial, but that is Serpent and Dove by Shelby Mulhern. I don't know. Malhern, I think. And this book is set in like France in like, I don't know, the 1700s or something like that. It's set in like a magical version of it, but like that's kind of the vibe. And basically it follows a witch and a witch hunter, and they are forced to get married, and then they have to like learn about each other and learn that they're not so different and they don't actually hate each other. And like there's this plot of these witches and they're being hunted, and our main character is also being hunted by another witch. It's a confusing plot, like it's hard to sum up, but I just didn't care. I'd heard really amazing things about it and I was super excited to read it, but it was just boring. I thought I didn't really like the characters. I didn't care for the romance at all. Like I just could not care less, and the plot was confusing and I don't think it was explained well at all. Neither was the magic system. I feel like that wasn't explained well at all, and I just kind of felt lost and confused, and I just didn't really connect with any of the characters, and it just felt really long for no reason, and I just didn't really like anything about it. I mean, it was an okay read, like I didn't have a terrible time. Like, I love anything that has witches in it, so that's like an automatic star already, but it just was not anywhere near as good as I had heard it was, so I think this was a case of too much hype for a book and it was just a letdown. The next book I didn't like was Frankly in Love by David Yoon. This book, I was excited. Okay, Alexa, like, can you not? We didn't ask for your opinion. But yeah, I just didn't get the purpose of this book again. It follows our main character, Frank Lee, and he is dating a white girl and he is Korean. Is he Korean or Chinese? Yes, he's Korean. He's Korean American and he's dating a white girl, which he knows will not please his parents. And one of his childhood friends is also, who's Korean American, is also dating a white boy, and that won't please their parents either. So they decide to fake date to like make their parents, to like meet their parents' approval. Can you guess what happens next? It's a shocker. Nothing happened in this book. Nothing happened. I don't get the point of this book. It was so dull. Like, I read it, I forgot the plot in 2 seconds because it was so unmemorable. The characters were so unmemorable. Everything was so unmemorable. That was my problem with it. It was just forgettable. That's all. I'm not going to go on about it because I just didn't care and it was so forgettable. The next book that was a disappointment was We Contain Multitudes by Sarah Henstra, and this was disappointing because the first half was incredible and the second half I did not like at all. This follows 2 boys whose names I can't remember, and basically their teacher sets up this thing where you are pen pals with the person that sits in your desk in another lesson, and so these boys start writing letters to each other and it's so cute, it's so good, it's such a good like jock nerd romance thing, and it was such a good strong start. It was like, it was impeccable romance, and then I hated the second half, to be honest. I still gave it the 3 stars because the first half was so good, but it was just such a letdown that I literally thought it was going to be like a favourite of the entire year, and the second half just took such a nosedive, and it was mainly because I just think so much of what happened was really unhealthy and was not dealt with in a healthy way, and it just felt kind of toxic to me, and I just was uncomfortable with a lot of stuff, and I didn't think the ending was resolved in the way it should have been, and yeah, it was just like really depressing and really like triggering. I'll put the trigger warnings down below because I can't remember all of them now, but it was just like horrible, and I just don't think any of it was resolved in a good or healthy way. So yeah, it was really disappointing. And the final book that I'm going to talk about is To Best the Boys by Mary Webber, and this book is about a girl. It's kind of set in like olden days, and she loves science, but she's a woman, so she doesn't really have the opportunities to explore her love of science like boys do in this time, and she is really disappointed by that, which me too, like me too. I want you to do your science, girl, like go for it. But she can't, and she really wants to go to university and she can't. So every year there's this competition, I don't know, does it have a name? But basically the boys can win a scholarship to this like really prestigious university if they go into this like maze puzzle thing and like solve the puzzles and the maze and get out. Like the first one to do it, I think, wins the scholarship. And so she's like, I'll pretend to be a boy, solve the maze puzzle, and then they can't say no to me because I will have proven that I am just as good as any of the boys. So she does that, And my main problem with this book was I thought I was going to love it. 1, feminism. Love feminism. 2, puzzles. Love puzzles. 3, science. Love science. 4, it just sounded like my kind of book, basically. I did appreciate the feminism. I do think that what it said around feminism was well done. I agreed with it. It was my kind of feminism. That bit was okay. The rest was very, very disappointing. It was probably the most predictable book I've ever read. Like, I could have, within 50 pages, told you beat for beat exactly what was going to happen. It was so predictable, like ridiculously predictable. It felt like it was written, like, it was that I was gonna say for middle grade, but that's offensive to middle graders because they have more of a brain to figure this out. Like, it was so predictable, and the characters were so bland, like the blandest character. Like, I know I've said other characters were bland, but these, I knew nothing about. They were so bland, like so bland. Oh, I can't tell you, so bland. Moving on. The writing felt like what I would have written at age 14 and called natural dialogue, and it just was so cringy and awkward and clunky, and I just hated every interaction because the writing felt so awkward. And I was like, did anyone read this and edit this? Like, come on guys, we can have better dialogue than this. Like, it's just continually getting darker. Like, this video started off bright and now we've just like, now we've talked about our disappointments, it's just like black out there. So sorry, I know my disappointments are dark. But I just think it was awkward and weird and cringy, and they were like, the puzzles were just boring and dumb and stupid, and I really didn't like it. Can you tell? So yeah, that was a big disappointment too. So those are all of the books that disappointed me in 2019. There were quite a few disappointments for various reasons. Tell me down below some of your disappointments of the year, why they were disappointing for you. I would love to know. And if you want to subscribe, stick around, you can follow me on Twitter or Goodreads, they're linked down below. And yeah, I would love it if you would stick around. It's a busy January, plenty of content coming out, and I'm super excited for the new year and everything I'm going to create in 2020 and all the books I'm going to read. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you have an absolutely wonderful rest of the day, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!